and where. Everyone obeyed the priests and the mullahs. But now look, these scrofulous troublemakers from Poland and Latvia. Rabbi Tarfon was a great hater of Christians and had an even greater hatred of Jewish heretics. And I've always thought it's wonderful that the word for a Jewish heretic, or the Jewish word for heretic, is apikuros, follower of Epicurus, student of Greek. That's a nice way to be called a heretic. Anyway, I'm not a great admirer of Rabbi Tarfon, but he had it right when he said, he echoes Strauss in a way, when he says, you are not obliged to complete the task, but neither are you free to give it up or to evade it. To be Jewish is to be involved in a continual struggle, a continual test, to be at continual risk, to be always aware of anxiety and danger and angst. Just as there could be, despite the best efforts of its enemies, no final solution to the so-called Jewish problem, Jewish question in Europe, so one has to say there's no ultimate security or salvation for the Jewish people or any other. More and more, for example, to me, Israel begins to resemble a part of the diaspora, not a solution to it or an alternative to it, just one other place where a large number of Jewish people live in great insecurity and constant doubt. Jews will always continue to be identified as malcontents, doubters, unsound, cosmopolitan, and yes, if you like, rootless. And I'll close by saying this. Because anti-Semitism is the godfather of racism and the gateway to tyranny and fascism and war, it is to be regarded not as the enemy of the Jewish people alone, but as the common enemy of humanity and of civilization, and has to be fought against very tenaciously for that reason, most especially in its current, most virulent form of Islamic jihad. Daniel Pearl's revolting murderer was educated at the London School of Economics. Our Christmas bomber over Detroit was from a neighboring London college, the chair of the Islamic Student Society. Many pogroms against Jewish people are being reported from all over Europe today as I'm talking. And we can only expect this to get worse, and we must make sure our own defenses are not neglected. Our task is to call this filthy thing, this plague, this pest, by its right name, to make unceasing resistance to it, knowing all the time that it's probably ultimately ineradicable, and bearing in mind that its hatred towards us is a compliment, and resolving some of the time at any rate to do a bit more to deserve it. Thank you. I was asked if I'd want a moderator, and I said no, because I don't think anyone thinks I've planted anyone in this audience. So if you raise your hands, yes, sir. There's a roving mic for you.
Thank you. I ask this question not in a confrontational way, but as somebody who is deeply appreciative of all that I have learned from you. As you have, I could ask this about any religion, but let's focus on Judaism. Are there any aspects of Judaism which you respect, admire, appreciate, and if so, what are they?
Okay. I mentioned one. The question was audible to all, I hope. Yeah. I mentioned one, which was the Judaism invites people to study its negation. I mean, I believe, with many others, that everything, Matthew Arnold, Leo Strauss, many others, everything is a choice, a struggle between Athens and Jerusalem. I'm with the Athenian side. I wish that the other side had won on Hanukkah, and that Jews had become the vectors of Greek philosophy in the world. I think that would have been wonderful. I think it's a real shame the Maccabees won that time. If they hadn't won, there'd be no Christianity and no Islam. We could have skipped the whole bloody thing. And so I'm impressed, though, that the Orthodox say, here's what you mustn't believe. And they told them to study Greek and not to become apikuros. Very few religions are as generous as that. And it's a tribute to the skepticism and the constant doubt that is involved, and is, I think, necessary, by the way, for survival, and probably is one of the reasons why this tribe did survive so much and for so long, that it did, in a way, keep an open mind as well as a great discipline and tradition. Then Jews don't proselytize much. Among other Jews they do, the Lubavitch do, for example, but they generally don't. What always alarms me about Christians and Muslims is they say, we have this wonderful secret. We have a personal God who really loves us, and if you believe in him, since I believe in him, I'm going to be saved. In fact, I'm not even going to die. And you'd think that would make them happy, but it doesn't. They can't be happy until you believe it too, by force. Well, fuck that. I haven't got a minute of my life to spend being proselytized by these riffraff. And then third, the Jews don't make the elementary stupid mistake of saying the Messiah's already come. So, and they do well in exile. And as I say, I mean, I think they found another exile in Palestine, and I don't think that the irony of that has quite yet sunk in, but I think that it will. Oh, sir, excuse me, I didn't see your hand.
Thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
My question is, I worry about the idea of a degree of anti-Semitism that you mentioned in the middle part of your lecture. I mean, how does one know the difference between harmful and harmless anti-Semitism, and also wouldn't the harmless people be the rats in the plague in the sewer analogy that you used?
Well, of course, the people who, so to say, have it mildly, could become the gullible victims of someone who is much less scrupulous. That's possible. But I do think it's worth making the distinction. That's why I took the risk of showing you the hideous visage of Mr. Gibson, because you see there someone who's really got it bad, and you can tell the real thing. And I happen to know the backstory, so I thought I'd start off like that. I mean, I know where it comes from. People who say, well, that's what you get for giving your money to Bernie Madoff, for example, are probably not going to kill you. By the way, anyone who says, did you say your name was Madoff? Oh, then in that case you can have my money. Probably does deserve a pasting. But it's actually while I'm on this subject, it's quite surprising. There was a time in America when a thing like that would have led to quite a lot, I think, of public and unofficial anti-Jewish feeling. It really hasn't. And I believe I know why, because almost everyone in the United States now has a Jewish friend. Many, many, many people have a Jew somewhere in their family. They know not to generalize, which wasn't true in the old days to the same extent. And I have a feeling that in the United States it's very well controlled, so to say. I'm not going to say this is the promised land, but I think that it should be a great Jewish project to keep the secular constitutional democracy of the United States going. So, given that I do believe that the prejudice is ineradicable because it appeals to the pseudo-intellectual, to the conspiracy theorist, to the envious and the jealous person, to the gullible person, it has all these human faculties on its side, you're not going to get rid of it. I think it's important to pick your enemies with some care and distinction. Sir. Sorry, ma'am. I was wondering what you'd done with your women. You're next. No, sorry, next for the lady, please.
Thank you. You mentioned your concern or interest in the liberals who you see as anti-Semitic. Having worked on the staff of both Martin Luther King and Jimmy Carter in the civil rights movement, and seeing some of those who, particularly Jimmy Carter as a case example, who would never have his picture taken with Dr. King while he was alive, and some in the liberal side of the Jewish community who didn't get involved, very, very, very few of us served on the front lines, try to take the civil rights movement situation with the underdog of the African Americans and put that into the Middle East, where the Palestinians become the underdogs and the Jews become the racists. And do you think that's maybe a little overcompensation for the fact that at the time when there was such a clear thing going on in our country, very few people went on the front lines and didn't understand that the final stage was reconciliation? And if you look at the Palestinians, there's within the leadership so few Hamas or whatever, the charters that want reconciliation, so how can you compare